Ewald Damen, creative director and partner of Virgile and Partners, has two dream dinner dates. Frida Kahlo and Andy Warhol, widely considered as progressive freethinkers and wildly creative. A man born in the Netherlands, who then spent his formative years living in the US, London, Rotterdam and Amsterdam, who now cites his globally influenced background as guiding his professional journey. Let's learn more about exposure to different cultures and how they can lend themselves to success in business and design. Who are you, Ewald? Welcome to the podcast studio. Ewald, I've never met an Ewald.
Well, I've only met one once in my life, so yeah, it's a very uncommon name.
It's a fabulous name. Where does it originate from?
It's originally a German name, as far as I know, but it's not been travelled much around, and I think the only places where you still see it is older countries, and it's not been used for a long time, so I think it's just not popular.
Yeah, it's like a Madonna name. It just needs to have kind of like nothing else around it. Ewald.
Ewald, that's it.
Ewald from Virgile and Partners. Right, icebreaker. Have you brought me something today?
I did, actually. It's a bit of a story to it because I'm currently redoing my own flat. So I'm living with a friend. So I have very little possessions around me at this point in time. But I do have this one, which is a gift to myself on Valentine's Day. And it's actually a Polaroid made by Nick Cave, the artist, singer and poet. And he also makes little Polaroids and then signs them. And I saw it and I loved it because it's got sort of his poetry coming through it. I love the actual image of St. Valentine's, which is actually a stained glass window of a church, which has more architectural references. And I love his work as an artist anyway. And I think what I like about his work is that it's very diverse. And I think that's something that I like in my own world. It's not just the one thing. So I saw it, and it's actually standing next to my desk. So it was an easy grab, but I do think it's one of my prized possessions.
Fascinating. So there's a real depth to you, isn't there, that we're gonna unravel, because that's fascinating. So a Polaroid by Nick Cave, and what do you read? What's the poetry that you can read from that?
I'm not so sure there is any poetry to that particular one, but he does write poetry. I'm not a big fan of poetry. I like his music more than that.
Uh-huh. You appreciate his artist.
Yeah,
him as
and
an artist.
I appreciate how he sort of thinks as well, and his performances and his interests probably as well. Because he's not just about his music; he's about more than that. And it's a one-off Polaroid as well, which is what I like as well. I like art and collecting, and I think we live in a world now where things are replicated really quickly, and that's something that's a unique piece. Nobody will ever have the same one. So.
Ooh, I'm excited. Now, your company's motto: create spaces that provoke curiosity.
Yes.
What is this also? Multi-layered experiences to create. I've been reading through your website, and it kind of ties in a little bit with your fabulous icebreaker. We create spaces that provoke curiosity. Multi-layered experiences.
I think we'd like to sort of take architecture or design in different ways. It's not just about creating a space that is trendy. And I think that's exactly what we try to do, but maybe we'll get to more depth of that.
Yes, we will. I'm excited. We're scratching the surface to get to know Ewald. So let's start out then. You started in the Netherlands. You began life in the Netherlands.
I did, in the south.
And you've travelled around the globe.
I have travelled quite a bit in my life, yes. But I think I grew up in the south of the Netherlands, near Maastricht, where also I started my first studies. And then as a teenager, kind of got diverted to the US for a gap year because I was very young in my studies, which was very good for me, I think, because I got taken out of my natural habitat.
When you say you were diverted to the US from the Netherlands, what does that mean?
Oh, I just did an exchange, which basically you do a high school in the US. And at the time, because I was quite young, I was always surrounded by quite old people or older people in my school.
How old were you?
I was 16.
Were you really clever? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you were.
No, I think the one thing I
light.
was very shy there, which is quite funny, because I think I got rid of that whilst I moved away. So it was a gap year.
So you spoke. What language did you speak in the Netherlands?
I speak Dutch, but we do have a sort of slightly different language in the south. So
Okay, so you speak two languages as a child.
yes.
And then at 16 you moved to the States. Can you speak
Yeah.
English?
Oh yes, we're from the Netherlands. We have no other choice. So
So you speak
grow
three
up-
languages.
You had to at that point, because in the Netherlands it's such a small country. So we grew up with English, BBC, TV as well. So English is the third language, and then
Any others?
German.
Oh my
Very
gosh,
close.
shame on the British people. We speak one language fluently,
Yeah.
and not even fluently for most of us. So 4 languages from the get-go.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, the other ones that I had in school disappeared. So
What
that's
swear words?
no, but French
Okay.
and Spanish, no, forgot all about it. But yeah, unfortunately.
So you moved to the States. Which part of the States?
I lived in Michigan, which was not by choice, but it was quite interesting. And I think it was quite
Culturally,
good.
how did you
was-
find that?
I think at first I thought I'd ended up in a TV show. It was a
How
bit
so?
weird. Because everything we saw from TV kind of on a high school program was kind of the way it was. It was a bit bizarre. And I also felt like it was a bit of a step back in time in a weird way. I don't know if that's because it's the Midwest or because the time, it was the 90s as well. So, but yeah, it was interesting.
And then you moved to Rotterdam.
Yeah, so I did my studies in the south, my art school in Maastricht, and then did a master's in Rotterdam. I first did building engineering, which was more technical, then art school, more conceptual, and then I did a master's in retail communication design.
Yes.
So how to sort of merge branding and 3D spatial design together, which was very interesting topic, because it goes further than just design. It's about, we had philosophy, psychology, etc. as topics as well. So it was more than just,
Yeah.
colors and
Top level design.
Yeah.
As we know it. Before we get on to your education trajectory, so culturally you've moved around. How did that feel? How do you feel about home?
Well, London at the moment is my home for sure, but I have a very big interest in different cultures, and fortunately through work also I've been able to travel a lot around. My holidays, I try to do once a year at least a 2-3 week holiday somewhere in a more exotic area. Unfortunately, the last few years has obviously been a bit more restrictive, but yeah, I've been around most of the continents of the world, and I love it because I love different cultures. I love traveling. Not mostly a glamorous traveler. I like backpacking almost.
Interesting.
And I love
I'm sure
driving around.
your company expenses will be delighted to hear that.
Yeah, maybe company expenses are slightly different because, yeah.
But some of your clients echo your cultural passion. I see kind of Harvey Nichols around the world,
Yeah.
fashion retailers, hotels all around the world. You're in India.
Yeah, India, beautiful country, but hard work. It always travel sometimes looks more glamorous than it actually is, but as we know. But I still love it. I love working with different cultures and different clients in different cultures as well. So, and if I get the chance to travel for those reasons, I will.
So it comes as no surprise, well, that you are a well-travelled individual up until you started your work, and then your work is almost mirroring your childhood nomad style.
Yeah, I think maybe it just grew into that. Not sure. I probably had that passion before, but I think it grew more and more as I started traveling. I think the hunger to see more and more is actually developed after traveling. And I think hopefully it keeps growing as well.
And I'm just wondering about, how does design translate cross-culturally?
Yeah, I think that's something which I find fascinating. And culture in design is actually, that was my topic of school, my final year. And I think, culture has an influence on design as well. And I think it's quite interesting how we work in different cultures. So you try to work towards that culture, but on the same side, you're kind of trying to bring your own culture in as well, and trying to get the balance right between the two, which I think, we did some interesting projects on that, sort of not just trying to replicate what the culture is perceived as in that particular country, and then sometimes we try to bring in something which is a new way of thinking for them, which maybe here is quite common or normal. So,
and it's an interesting point, isn't it, about design? What comes first? Your vision as a designer for the future, and what people are looking and anticipating and assuming they're going to receive, or what comes first?
Well, I think we try to, when we get a project, and I think I with the previous, my old partner, Carlos Virgile, who started the company, we wrote a book, and it was all about how we approach projects rather than what we did. It was not a sort of catalogue of projects, but it was about why and how, and very different projects that we worked on. The outcome is extremely different, but the approach is always the same.
Oh, interesting.
So like you said, we've done work for Harvey Nichols, but we also work for Harrods. And they're two brands who live a mile apart.
How so?
How would you mean?
How do the brands live a mile apart?
Because they're literally like a kilometre apart on Knightsbridge, geographically. So Harvey Nichols' flagship is like around the corner. So they are two retailers who have the same ethos as a department store. But for us, the approach to a Harrods and a Harvey Nichols is extremely different because they're such different brands. Although they both do the same thing, they both sell makeup, handbags, clothing, but the way we approach those projects is extremely different. And I think that's trying to get into their culture first. And obviously we have a vision of how we think things should be and should be working, but the outcome is extremely different because of what their vision is as well.
So would that be a starting point, the culture of the brand that you're working for?
For sure, yeah. I think it's very important because what I think very often gets done by agencies is putting on their house style. And I think if you look at our work, the house style is non-existent because we try to approach it in a very different way. So sometimes our work can be very minimal or really like Harvey Nichols, it's actually quite disruptive. Or Harrods is actually quite classical. And I quite like that because the diversity of the approach of the job makes every job way more interesting than just repeating what you've done and was successful for another client and just repeating the same thing. So.
Hey there! If you're enjoying this episode and want to hear more exciting and informative chats about design and architecture, then don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. Anyway, back to the episode.
So how do you define culture? How's culture defined within a brand? What's the starting point?
Well, I think a lot of brands have got a very good background, and sometimes you talk to clients and they know very well what their brand is. They've got their brand book, etc. But sometimes you talk to clients and they don't know what their brand is. So we kind of, when we start a project, rather than doing depending on the client, but sometimes they ask for it, but we don't do strategy pieces before it, but we always analyze the brand. Like, this is what you're about. And we very often take references of art or of street culture. It's not necessarily, the four brand pillars that some companies give to you. And if they do, we try to sort of find out what is the essence of that and what do you mean with that as well. And we very often then translate that into a sort of more visual part for the clients to to get their affirmation of this is what we're about. And that's kind of the start of the project, because then we sort of say, and your ambitions and your aims with this project is this. And then we sort of start working on the actual solution for the project rather than just saying, oh, you need a restaurant, here you go.
I like that. So art and street culture are criteria that will influence your process.
Many other things. And I think that's what I think is the interest as well, because culture is one of them. We just talked about it. Even economics. There's so many things. The new things that are coming ahead much more is sustainability. Finally, because it's always been one of those things that clients say, "Oh, I want to be sustainable," but actually, very often, by the time the project is delivered, that ambition has disappeared because of finances or time restrictions. But we do see that actually is now becoming way more important. And I think that's a cultural shift in people's minds. Hopefully, it's going to shift further and further. But we do see that the importance of that will influence projects as well. So it's not just design and trends that influence projects, I think.
And I've got down here cost, style and reason.
Yes. So I think, cost is always an issue. And I think with that in mind, you make decisions in certain ways. And I think that's sort of trying to stay with the vision of the project without having that cost being the influence of it failing at the end. If, some designers have the ability to get clients that have very big budgets, but I can see that it's also a reasonable choice of a client to not spend that much money. And I think that's something that you have to be very aware of as a designer as well. We can design and specify the most glamorous materials, but it's not always a valuable choice to do. So,
can you give an example of one of your favourite projects or within the company whereby it represents the correct blend for you of art and popular culture influences?
I think that's going a little bit back to the Harvey Nichols project. We were asked to do the flagship for them in Birmingham. It's a few years ago now, so it's maybe a bit time-wise, but we really looked at what the brand was and how they had to set themselves out in the world of department stores within the UK, but also in the world, because they have got many franchises around the world as well, the different stores. And it was about a brand that actually was more disruptive than Harrods or, say, Selfridges.
What does that mean, disruptive, to Harvey Nichols?
They were a bit more edgy, a bit more cooler. I think Harrods is obviously way more established, and I think Harvey Nichols was a bit more fun as well. Didn't take themselves too serious, and I think that kind of. Also, the other thing was that they were not, in our view, a department store, and we called them a house of fashion, boutique, rather than the big Harrods next door, which, it is a department store where you can buy everything. In Harvey Nichols, you can't. So what we said, you're a curated offer of fashion, and the fashion that they sell, the merchandising, was also different from their client or competitors around the corner. So we said, you're more disruptive within this. And at the time, and I think that's a bit of a shift, and maybe you can call it a trend, but we see that fashion brands are becoming way more expressive in their style and design. And you see it in fashion, but you also see it in their store design. If you compare stores of 15 years ago of some of the high fashion brands like Prada and Gucci, they kind of all look the same. But if you do the same thing now, they're very, very different. And I think that's something that intrigues me and obviously our studio, that sort of very strong expression. And I think we felt that Harvey Nichols was exactly that. And it was more creative in its design. So I think that's where we started to really lean back onto art references and also, like you said earlier, the balance between a marble finish and next to it is a concrete or a plywood. So really mixing very cheap building materials that you would normally even not see And obviously it's sort of referenced, brands like Celine who did that as well. but it was a much more sort of creative approach to store design, which I think, we did a wall full of bricks. And then in the end, we kind of said there needs to be another finish. So we just chose some sort of silver foil that was lying around in the site. So in that sense, I think the outcome of that was actually really interesting.
It's almost the embodiment of the demographic who shops there.
Yeah.
The embodiment of their values, earthy, grounded.
Yeah.
Real,
and
raw.
Also interested in different things because, everything is around us, if everything is quite bland, you kind of want to stand out. And I think it was...
Which is what the customers, I'm sure, want to feel.
What they are about, yes. So I think it worked really well, but on top of that, it was also one of the most fun projects we had in the studio, because it was literally being able to be super creative, and the client was really embracing us doing that as well. So really like disruptive, kind of like proposing things like, oh, is that something you would put on a ceiling? No. Okay, then it's right. Let's do it.
What a great project.
Fun. Yeah, it was really fun. And I think it did give us a little bit of an interest in that sense.
And also it aligns very clearly with Virgile and Partners' brand values, provoking curiosity, which is fascinating.
Yes.
Do you get yourself involved with projects and clients that aren't aligned with, that are just a little bit boring? Obviously, you don't have to name names, but...
No, I think in all essence, all our clients are, and I think actually every client is trying to push boundaries. I mean, I don't think any client would come in and say, can you please do me a boring store or a hotel or restaurant? And I think even a more sort of composed or more timid kind of design style would try to still push the boundaries a bit, so for them at least.
You feel like you're attracting the right type of clients that kind of whet your appetite.
Yeah, but even I think, even clients that maybe are not looking for that, we still try to push it that direction.
Yeah.
And maybe that's also why they choose to work with us as well. But
yeah, there's definitely a depth to you, isn't there? I'm curious about your education as well. So you started, your route was architectural building and engineering, and then art school, and then retail communication design,
Yes.
which is fascinating, because I feel, you have the affinity with the design aspect, you understand that, and then you're also very commercial.
Yes, and I think actually, design is still my main trait as a person. I love architecture and I love that, and I actually even love details in architecture. So my engineering is definitely a background, but as I was going through my studies, I got more and more interested in how does this get applied to the real world, And yes, of course, everybody can be an architect and just design, but I was really interested in that sort of. That's how I ended up doing the more commercial side of it, which is retail and retail communication design. How does this actually get applied, and why do you do certain things? And I think it started off when I did my first dissertation for the engineering course, and it was about determinism in architecture, which means how people perceive and how they use architecture. And I think that sort of mindset, how people use and actually have a perception of architecture, has sort of intrigued me throughout my life.
Give an example of how people perceive architecture.
Well, the determinism obviously could be like how imposing a cathedral is and how submissive people almost become because of the architecture.
I feel like that about when I walk in front of Westminster Cathedral.
Yeah, exactly, and it's all done to give you that feeling, to make you feel in a certain way, because it was built for a big religion, and they wanted you to be sort of part of that. But that can be translated almost to retail as well, because retail nowadays, and I think that's a cultural shift a bit as well. E-commerce has made retail in bricks and mortar so much more important in experience. Everybody's talking about it, but shopping is more of than just going to buy a toothbrush. People want to be
Entertained.
intrigued, entertained. They want to see theatre, and I think that is part of it. And I think it is not just about having the right adjacencies within the store, but also it's like, how do you present merchandising goods? What is the first impression? How and that's one thing that we find more and more as well. How does it change over time? Because customers and consumers are so used to so much change in their lives now. They're on Instagram every 10 seconds and they see so many things. So when they go to a store and they see the same thing 3 times, they probably won't go back. So it's about that element as well.
Interesting. Have you got any examples of flexible retail spaces?
I think to be honest, very, very many retailers are doing that now. Like if you look at Selfridges, they've got the corner shop, what they call it's a monthly changing store. So every month, I think they put a new brand in there or a new concept, and it's purely based on actually giving that experience activity within the store that really attracts people back and really wows people as well, which obviously works towards the brand of Selfridges, but also towards the brands that actually use that space.
Do you think that is new? I mean, I'm hearing about it's all about the experience, all about the mood creation. But for me, it was always there.
It was always there. You're absolutely right. And I think, actually, just talking about Selfridges, that was the ethos of Gordon Selfridges. It was about theatre in the store. So you're absolutely right. It was always there. But I think in the 50s and 60s, shopping became shopping as a sort of very strict way as well. And it has less of that theatre. I think we came from theatre and we kind of made it more dry, marketing-based, 2-for-1 kind of level. And now we're back into that more sort of like people want to be wowed. And I think it's a cultural shift as well because people have so much more access to international things that are going on. Whilst 10, 15 years ago, we were doing rollout stores globally, which all had to be identical. Now we're doing the complete opposite. Everything needs to be bespoke and different, and because customers travel, maybe not physically, but through their mobile phones, so they have much more access, and they want to be sort of intrigued by that. And so I think that you're right. It's not a new thing, but I think it's crept in more importantly again.
What are the biggest challenges facing your business? We're going to talk about sustainability, obviously, but biggest challenges for an architecture and design company?
I mean, to get the right clients, probably. And I think, as I said, actually, all our clients, they're all great when you start to work with them. So, but it is always, finding the clients. I think that's probably the challenge. And I think we always have the opinion that if we keep delivering interesting work, then hopefully we get the right clients that follow, which we have been very lucky with. So I think that's the biggest challenge, but also we've managed to keep it up. So,
how do you think your team would describe you in adjectives?
Oh dear. I don't know. I don't know what they would physically say, but I do think that we have a really good, strong team that works really closely together.
I'm not going to let this go. 3 adjectives.
Oh, no.
Silver fox.
Oh, yeah, it might have come up at some point.
Soulful. I'll just keep saying them, but you still got to say 3. Deep, thoughtful, detailed.
Detailed for sure. Funny. I hope I'm also quite honest. I've had one which I hated. It was an enigma. Well, that was. I don't even know who said that, but that.
What
came
did
back
they
to
mean?
me. I don't know actually, but I think one was funny, but I think it was more a joke.
I can see
but I
that.
think I think I have been an inspiration to some people, and I don't think that's necessarily, but I think what I try to do with that is that when I work with people, that I encourage them to be themselves and to actually let them say their thing as well. And I think that's exactly why our studio works quite well, because there's obviously a hierarchy, but we try to minimize that in many ways. And nobody, no junior, no senior is above anybody if it comes to an idea and if it comes to the right thing to do. So, and I've learned that through my first job, where I once had an idea where everybody around the table was like, "Oh, that's great," and then my then boss was like, "Yeah, but I've worked with him for 10 years, so I think we're going to go with that idea." And I was like, "Oh." So that's exactly
That's not the best
that's not the best
idea.
way. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope that's more the inspiration and actually giving people opportunities. Fairness, exactly.
Have you read this month's issue of Designer magazine yet? Available in digital and print editions, Designer magazine keeps you updated on the world of design and architecture. Get your free trade subscription today at designerarty.co.uk.
So, your dream dinner date.
Oh, yes.
Frida.
I mean, I could only choose 2 at the time.
Oh, tell me more.
I think, I'd have a table of 12 probably if I could,
Right,
but I wouldn't know.
Who would you invite then? Frida and Andy Warhol.
Yes.
Like, why? I've got a picture of Frida. Why do you love Frida?
I'm just intrigued by her, and I think I would invite her. And I think if I would have to, I could only choose 2 at the time, and I think I'm very intrigued by both Andy Warhol and Frida.
What
Kahlo.
about? What questions do you want to ask?
Because I don't know that much about him,
Yeah.
and or her and him, and they've been sort of become these sort of people that I think lots of people think they know how they were, but I'm not sure that that's the real representation of who they were. And I think I watched the Andy Warhol documentaries. I don't know if you've seen them.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So you feel that they wore a mask, that people...
Well, Andy Warhol for sure did, I think. Frida Kahlo, I think she was... Yeah, she kind of did as well. But I would be intrigued to actually know the person behind. I think that was the reason why I mentioned them. And I'm also intrigued by their art. I went to Frida Kahlo's studio in Mexico City,
How was
and the
that?
house, it's incredibly, but it's so layered again. She had this very difficult relationship with her husband. She eventually moved back to her childhood house. So there's so much layers and depth to her story, which I think is intrigues me. And so it's not just about them being famous artists or anything like that. It was more like, it's more the personality behind it that intrigued me. So.
And Andy Warhol, what would you like to ask him?
I think I would just like to have a conversation with him, open, take your mask off, and who are you, and where do you come from? I kind of know where he comes from, but that also, I think, put a mask on him in his later life, and I think he was actually admitted of that as well. I'm always trying to dig deeper than just the facade.
I sense
Scratch a
that.
bit further.
So if you could take any project, doesn't mean your hands have had to touch it yet, could be another company, which project would you like to completely lift the mask off and start from scratch?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I mean, that's a very tricky question.
Any project in the world.
project.
Apparently City Hall in Boston's really ugly.
Oh, I've not been to that one. I mean, there was one that I thought was quite intriguing, which is it's the Pan Am building in New York.
Right.
Which is a beautiful old Saarinen kind of building, and I think it's now converted, but to do something with structures like that, like I quite like quite iconic design buildings. I can walk past an old warehouse and be like, oh, really would love to do something with that. So I think it, like you said, that it would probably be one of those but there's so many of them still.
You
right?
like something that's got good bones.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's
a depth
also
to its soul.
Yeah. So there has to be character already. We do a lot of work in Harrods, which I find really intriguing because it's got so much history. And I think actually one of the projects that we recently completed is the Egyptian halls. Mm-hmm. So we had to replace them with a more architectural significant design. And it was an amazing project because, you actually have something that is already quite well known as architectural piece, and then you have to make a new design that actually has got a very high design value. And we also went very much back into the archive history of the Harrods archive to find out what the room looked like before it was the Egyptian Hall, which was probably the first room ever built in Harrods, and it was very Edwardian architectural, really decorative.
So it's had two changes?
It's had two changes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the original design was obviously removed when the Egyptian halls went in, and now we've redesigned it to be, again, a little bit more in that style, but in a contemporary style. So
How do you measure success with something like that?
I think, there's many ways of measuring success. Firstly is your client's happiness, but also when you walk into a space, and I think that's what I have very often, like when I walk in a space, I'm like, yeah, we did it. Yeah, you feel quite quickly if it is successful or not. And then there's obviously, does it make money in commercial terms? But I think the other thing is that does it stay alive longer than a couple of years? And I think that's something that I think is also quite important. Like, we might touch on it later, but sustainability is something that design is so often quite quick. And also going back to the trend thing is like, please, let's not do the trendy thing, because in 2 years' time, people take it out. And yes, you can use sustainable materials, but that's not the right way to do it. So to design something which is actually something that stands the test of time, where you can still do alterations without having to start from scratch again, I think that's quite important.
So in the Egyptian rooms within Harrods that you renovated, what materials will you be using in there?
They have been made out of quite sort of natural materials, so marble and real bronze, which can be recycled. So it is possible, but marble obviously is more difficult to recycle. But to use qualitative materials, hopefully in the right design, allows it to stay for a lot longer than what happens very often. So I think it is finding that right balance between designing something that has the ability to stay much longer than just a couple of years.
And tell me about this bronze that you took onto site at Harrods. Was it moulded, welded on site? And
it's all prefabricated out off site. Yeah, we do those jobs quite quick because obviously. But yeah, it's an intricate detailing that is required for those jobs, which I actually really enjoy and doing.
So sustainability, is it being passed to clients, or are clients, or is it hot air?
I think at the moment most of our clients are actually bringing it up as a really important subject, which I find really good. It's something that we want to, and we've been trying to get in, but sustainability was always had a bit of a price tag to it. As soon as you touch a material that says sustainable, all of a sudden the prices double from others. But I think there might, and hopefully there is a shift in that as well, because obviously there are a lot more materials available now. And I think that's, it's a client requirement. As I said, sometimes it gets sort of watered down during the process. But I do see that a lot more clients are actually really focused on it now. And I think they do see that if they don't, they will have repercussions probably from the public as well. Hopefully the awareness becomes stronger and stronger. It's not necessarily something that people always shout about, but I think they should really be conscious about it. So.
And do you have resources internally to manage the kind of like the offering of the sustainable products?
We're working on making that an actual proper offering. Yes, yeah, we're actually looking at training people in the right way and also doing CPD courses to make people more aware. So it is something that we really want to be sure that it's sort of more embedded in the studio rather than an afterthought. And we just recently did a big project with a client, which unfortunately I can't name the name of yet. But it was very much focused on sustainability and making sure that not just the design, but also the timelessness of the project was indeed in a sustainable way.
Are there any countries doing it better or best?
Not sure yet. No, I think
I guess I'm asking that because of your focus is worldwide with your business.
I think countries like Germany are way more advanced, way more stricter on the design. The UK is following a lot better the last few years. When we do projects in, unfortunately, countries like India, it's not so much. It's a steep learning curve, and I think we see the European countries following a lot faster now. But it is obviously something that hopefully trickles down into other countries as well. But yeah,
how are Germans doing it? How's Germany doing it better?
I think they're just better set up. They have certificates for materials, the way they approach work. I think they have a lot more rules and regulations around it. And I think the sustainability rules within interior design in particular, there is no real sort of green stamp approval yet. That's the one that's recognized. And I think that's something we need to work towards to get something that actually, certifies something as sustainable, because some people just say their product is sustainable at the moment, but how sustainable is it really? And everybody talks about zero carbon. It's like, there's no such thing as zero carbon. If you manufacture or touch something, you've damaged something in the world. So to say that something is completely offset doesn't, in my opinion, exist. So it's just trying to get the balance right of that.
Which is a symptom of anything new.
Yeah.
There's always going to be variables. There's always going to be people that are telling truths and untruths, and which is why someone like Germany, there's power in numbers.
Yeah. And I think, to use sustainability as a trend or the greenwashing kind of thing is probably worse than not saying anything about it. But yeah.
Ewald, thank you. You are
you.
a pleasure. Keep shining light where people don't want light shone.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Very good. Now, if you've enjoyed today's episode, do like and subscribe. And I'm going to be here every Monday morning with more exciting guests. See you then.